So welcome, my name is Elizabeth Connors. We are so glad to have you here with us for this virtual learning session on the topic of promoting mental health awareness in schools. This is a webinar that's hosted by the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center in partnership with the National Center for School Mental Health for the entire Southeast region. My name's Elizabeth Connors. I'll be kind of your host and your MC today. I'm a faculty member with the National Center for School Mental Health, working with the Southeast region and also at Yale University in the Department of Psychiatry. So as our work is SAMHSA funded, we want to be sure to always include this disclaimer. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, Youth Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Our learning objectives today is to increase our shared understanding about mental health awareness and some of the related terms and concepts that come up, such as mental health literacy and stigma. Also, our purpose is always to increase knowledge of local examples in the Southeast region of how people are taking action this school year to promote mental health awareness among students and school staff. So we have a couple of examples prepared to share with you, but we always welcome additional sharing of examples and things you're doing to move forward this important topic area in your schools. We always want to use this time to promote cross-state networking and shared learning so that our best practices, successes, and challenges of addressing mental health awareness can really be informed by one another's work and a lot of our practice-based evidence that's happening on the ground. So please use this time to connect and network with one another, ask questions, and share ideas. Our agenda for today is to start out with some general concepts and terms such as mental health awareness, literacy, and stigma. These are very interrelated terms. You are likely familiar with all of them, but I just have a few introductory slides so we kind of make sure to get on the same page about these concepts. We are also going to talk about a few best practices and strategies for schools that are derived from the National School Mental Health Curriculum. So we can point you exactly where you can go into the curriculum if you want to learn more about those best practices. We have two Southeast examples we're excited to feature today. One is from Cleveland County, North Carolina, and the other is Bay District Schools in Florida. And then, you know, we always come with a lot of resources for you all. So we have a host of resources at the end of the slide deck that you may be interested in pursuing on this topic. So before we dive in, we do want to welcome everybody here, and we encourage you to type in the chat box your name, organization, and state. As just another housekeeping reminder, please of course mute your microphones if you're not speaking. Doesn't sound like we have a lot of background noise, but it's always worthwhile to say that. So please type in your name, organization, and chat and state into the chat box so we can see we have here with us today. And it looks like we have some folks who we see on all of our learning sessions. We have some newcomers. It's a little bit of a mix, and we love that. We have some representation from outside of the Southeast in Michigan. Hey, that's exciting. See a lot of folks from North Carolina, Mississippi, South Carolina. Wonderful. Florida. And we are recording this learning session, so if you have any colleagues that aren't able to join today or had conflicts with the time, that will be posted on the Southeast MHTTC website, so you can share the content with them or refer back to it afterwards. Great, so welcome everybody, and please keep those introductions coming in. As usual, we have representation from folks who are in state departments of education and behavioral health. We also have some folks who are at district levels and some school building levels. So it's really, I think, a rich group in terms of the multi-level representation we are often able to have on these calls. Okay. So when we talk about mental health awareness, we're just referring to individual or groups' state of being conscious or aware of something specific, so of mental health in this case. And in our efforts to raise awareness about particular issues, we want to provide information to increase knowledge on this topic, but also to correct any misinformation that may be out there. Often having awareness about mental health is a first step toward decreasing stigma around mental illness and mental health, individuals with mental health needs, and particularly toward helping individuals access resources that could be useful to them. So mental health awareness kind of has this dyadic purpose where we're wanting to increase accurate knowledge about mental health while at the same time decreasing stigma that may be associated with mental illness. One of the messages that I find particularly helpful around this topic is that mental health is for everyone and everyone has mental health. So sometimes the term mental health feels like it's getting synonymous with mental illness. And it's really important that we collectively continue to dispel those myths and make sure that we're talking about mental health and wellness as something that everybody has, kind of exists on a continuum, right? And sometimes our mental health and wellness might go up and down on a day-to-day basis. So we know that mental health is also essential to our overall health, wellness, and success, right? And so what's happening in our mind and what's happening in our body is completely inseparable, and it really pervades all of the things that we do in all of our functioning. So mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And so we want to make sure that our efforts around mental health awareness are not just about decreasing stigma related to folks that have mental illness, for example. We don't want to focus the conversation on mental illness. So by opening it up and really saying that mental health is something that everybody has, just like everyone has physical health, then it can become kind of a more universally acceptable concept that we all embody. We, obviously need to be physically healthy to work on skills to keep ourselves healthy and thriving, and that's exactly the same with mental health. So we know that, of course, we all experience stressors, worry, loneliness. 2020 has certainly shown us that mental health is something everyone needs to pay attention to. And so by raising awareness around this, we can really, normalize the experiences that we're all having kind of collectively as a society. And for those individuals who really do need additional supports to maintain their wellness, promote the likelihood that they would be connected to those supports. There is an important story here about individuals experiencing mental illness, however, in their lifetime. That is an important part of our mental health awareness work, right? So you just heard me say a moment ago, mental health awareness should not be focused only on mental illness. But the rates of mental illness in our society are also related to why this is an important topic, right? So we know that 1 in 5 people will experience a diagnosable level of a mental health need in their lifetime. This is absolutely true for children, adolescents as well. And unfortunately, what we know is less than half of those are actually going to be able to access the services they need to address those concerns. So here's where schools come in and school mental health, because schools really help increase access to services that are needed, and also providing mental health supports and coping and resilience supports at universal levels throughout the building, right? So schools are absolutely a huge part of the solution of increasing access to mental health services and supports. But we know that in, kind of general population, it's really hard for people to connect to the services that they need if it's not in a primary access point like a school, or if they're not connecting to their primary care provider, for example. There's a big gap in access. We know that raising awareness can help also combat stigma around mental illness. There are a lot of reasons why people do not connect to the services that they need. Sometimes it's a shortage of providers, not knowing where to start, but sometimes there is also an element of stigma around mental illness and desire to maybe not access help or engage in help seeking. So this is kind of where mental health literacy comes in. So mental health literacy really boils down to knowledge and beliefs about mental disorders that are going to help people in the general population recognize, manage, or prevent. So there's kind of three main elements of mental health literacy, and I know many of you have been part of mental health first aid training. So mental health first aid is one of the resources we'll share at the end, which is all about promoting mental health literacy. So there's kind of three parts here that if we're improving mental health literacy for ourselves, for our educators, for our students, that we want to tackle. The first is understanding how to maintain good mental health, right? And so this kind of comes down to taking action in your life to make sure that you have healthy routines and balance in your life to maintain health and well-being. The second is to recognize when there's some early warning signs, when things are bubbling, when an issue may be developing or you're feeling a higher than usual level of stress or distress or disengagement, right? All of the warning signs we think about when it's starting to kind of get outside of the realm of what would be typical for that individual. And then knowing how and where to make the connection to treatment when that's needed. And that can be for yourself and for others. So one of the developers of the mental health first aid training and a scholar in Australia, Anthony Jorm, really talks about how mental health literacy is not just knowing about mental health, but being prepared to take action for yourself or for someone else to promote mental health and well-being. And that comes down to both recognition and connecting to treatment when needed. So this is kind of around, if you've heard of help-seeking efficacy, it's a very similar concept. So here's the other component of increasing mental health awareness and literacy that's really important, which is reducing mental health stigma. And so the definition of mental health stigma that SAMHSA advises us on is that stigma is a cluster of negative attitudes and beliefs that motivate the general public to fear, reject, avoid, and discriminate against people with mental illness. So stigma is not just a matter of using the wrong word or action. It's really about disrespect. It's about the negative labels to identify a person living with mental illness. And ultimately, stigma becomes a barrier because the fear associated with stigma and the resulting discrimination that comes from it really discourages individuals and their families from getting the help they need. So stigma is really going to interfere with the help seeking for yourself and others, in addition to the discrimination and the burden that it puts on people living with mental illness. And, you know, this I know is sometimes not necessarily intentional. There's obviously sometimes cultural perceptions and a variety of other factors that play into the stigmas that we may hold. And sometimes it just comes down to a lack of knowledge, right? So increasing our efforts around mental health literacy and increasing kind of mental health awareness generally, particularly in our school populations, that's really the best way to go about combating these sometimes multi-generational issues and societal issues around stigma. So it's kind of like one child, one teacher, one school at a time can really make a big difference on tackling these issues. And, you know, I know in my work with many of you in the Southeast, this is often a topic that comes up. So I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. Depending on where you're situated, you may have issues related to stigma in your school communities or broader communities that are part of the work that you're doing in your multi-tiered systems of support to promote mental health and well-being from the school angle. Something that I guess would be just my personal reflection of 2020, I think one of the silver linings that the events of the past year has provided is perhaps an increased recognition that we all have mental health, and that the stressors that are coming up in our lives really do affect our well-being. And I guess I have some hope that it's starting to normalize that we all have difficult periods in our life. But that's just my personal reflection and my hope for the future, and something that may be a silver lining. I'm not sure if that that shift resonates with you at all based on the students that you work with or your school communities. And so from there, actually, before we dive into some more best practices and strategies for schools, I did want to take a moment and just open it up and kind of hear from you all in terms of what you're seeing and hearing in your networks. Have the conversations or activities in your state changed recently, since COVID around these topics? Have you noticed any changes in how mental health literacy awareness or stigma has been talked about, or levels of interest in them just over the past year or so? And feel free to type in the chat or unmute and share aloud.
I saw a small positive change from a couple administrators. So we're used to doing a daily physical health assessment. Do you have any of these signs and symptoms? But based on the request of some teachers, some of our principals started including a mental health wellness self-check-in. And I thought that was a really good way just to put it on the forefront of the day, like how are you physically and how are you mentally? And then they could self-select to see another staff member at the school if they would like to. And I thought that was just a good way to just normalize it a little bit and just put it right out there at the beginning of your day.
That's perfect. Thanks for sharing, Ryan. Routine feelings check-ins are an excellent kind of universal thing that can be done as part of the daily routine. And you're absolutely right. It normalizes that we all have feelings because we all do the check-in process together. I'm curious, Ryan, is that for in-person learning or distance learning or some combination? I know some folks that are dealing with distance learning are thinking about how to do these things over the screen.
So it could be for either distance or in-person learning, but then it's for staff members who are at the school that day. And so one of the things that we're seeing is even if they're teaching virtually, they're in a classroom alone a whole day. And that's an added burden that maybe we didn't necessarily anticipate in the beginning. We knew the virtual instruction would be hard, but not the isolation you would feel just having to stay in a classroom all day, not having that interpersonal connection that teachers are used to. So it's for staff who would be on campus.
Gotcha. Oh, it's staff check-ins. It's staff feeling check-ins. Thank you. I thought it was, so we do that often for students, but I love that, that element that you're having the staff doing a feeling check-in at the beginning. That's awesome. I see that Priest typed in that in many ways the pandemic is asking us to be more creative and flexible in increasing awareness, connection, and referring students to services using social media to address stigma with students. And I would absolutely agree with you. For folks that are dealing with the distance learning realm, it's really raised the importance of the connection that we naturally are able to develop more easily when we're in person. And now that we're behind all these screens, the isolation is really quite huge. And so it's not only kind of raising awareness around the importance of those connections, but really calling us to be very creative and intentional in making sure that students are connected to one another and the school community. Great. Thank you for those. Any other things that folks would want to be willing to share about how they're working on mental health literacy or stigma, particularly in the past year? So keep thinking on it because we have some examples coming later. So I'll ask you again to share what you're doing. And Kathy, I absolutely agree. I hope the motto of giving everyone more grace will continue. Absolutely. There's kind of a shared understanding that we're all a little fire under pressure right now, including the staff and the kids. And so giving one another a little bit of grace in this process is absolutely needed. Okay, so here are some best practices and strategies for schools that we pulled from the National School Mental Health Curriculum, which, as many of you know, is on the National Mental Health Technology Transfer Center network. There are a number of modules there that are self-paced modules. They're 45-minute PowerPoint presentations that you can either view a recording of or use to train folks who you're working with, and a number of resources all about comprehensive school mental health. So often on these virtual learning sessions, we kind of go into the National School Mental Health curriculum and we pull a couple slides that are particularly relevant so we can point you to that resource. And actually, Tara, I know we have some folks on the call that are new today, so if you could actually put in the chat where folks can go find the school mental health curriculum, that might be really helpful if it's a new resource for folks. So the mental health literacy element really comes from the Tier 1 Universal Mental Health Promotion module out of our school mental health curriculum that was developed by the National Center for School Mental Health. And here's a variety of best practices that you may consider. Developing a clear plan for assessing current mental health literacy, so you have some sort of a sense of baseline data to inform your team's plan for further improvement. You may also want to collaborate with key stakeholders to meaningfully and feasibly promote mental health literacy. So that could include working with students, parents, and school staff to determine what are the most meaningful and feasible ways to promote mental health literacy. A number of the resources that I have at the end are actually related to like student groups and things like that, because involving our student voice and our family members' voice in this process can really help us come up with new ideas to not only understand what are some of the types of mental health literacy that we need to message, but what are the ways that we can do that in a way that will really be heard and resonate with people in our community. Also, to deliver and evaluate professional learning opportunities, of course, for our staff, particularly in schools, right? Because the vast majority of our staff in schools do not have a training background in mental health because they're trained in education, and yet they're facing a variety of mental health and well-being needs cropping up for their students and themselves all the time. And so being able to prepare our educators with the training and knowledge they need to understand and recognize these issues and connect students as needed or connect themselves as needed is really important. Certainly, again, developing activities with key stakeholders is going to be important, so that this is not really a top-down activity that should rest on the shoulders of the district or the school administrators alone, but really making sure that this is a shared family, community, student, school agenda, and is really co-constructed, is going to help it be more relevant and also more sustainable. Delivering activities throughout the school year. We know this is really hard. Your PD days are limited and have probably been further slashed by all of the things that you're dealing with during COVID. So I don't say this lightly when I say there, you need to be delivering activities throughout the school year. However, we know one-time trainings really don't stick. And these issues of mental health and well-being are coming up daily and weekly in our school buildings. So whatever ways we can get really creative and make sure that there are activities throughout the school year supporting these is absolutely a best practice that we should be aspiring to. And then of course, reassessing on a routine basis, whatever your metrics are, to get a sense of where your school community is on these topics. And making sure that your work is data driven. I do see Martha share that they have professional developments focused on ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences or potentially traumatic events that people may have experienced. There's really strong research from the ACEs study showing that the number of traumatic experiences is associated with the number of chronic health conditions and educational success. And so training on ACEs can be really relevant, as well as social emotional learning, because social emotional learning is really a set of practices that you can offer at the Tier 1 level to make sure that all students have the coping skills that they need to be resilient, particularly in this difficult time, but really at all times. Thanks for sharing that, Martha. So a number of helpful tips. Here's just some strategies for increasing mental health literacy. And some of these are included on the resources slide. If you've not tapped into your local NAMI, I encourage you to do that. They can give a presentation to students and teachers. It's often free of charge. NAMI's Ending the Silence presentation has been shown to significantly reduce stigma and increase knowledge about mental health. And they will tailor it to different audiences like students, school staff, and families. And usually it's completely free of charge. participating in a mental health awareness campaign or developing a mental health awareness campaign that's really local is something that other school groups have done. Using teacher-delivered mental health curriculums to convey this information to their students is another strategy. And then collaborating with organizations to get youth mental health first aid. But as you'll see from our examples that are coming up, as well as the resources we have at the end, this is just a short list. So the sky is the limit on this topic. You really want to be guided by what the needs and ideas and energies and motivations are in your local community and the stakeholders who you're working with. So pay close attention to the voices of people who are part of your community to see what's needed. And also I recognize that youth mental health first aid, for example, is at cost, and some of the other things on this list are not. And so there's obviously going to need to be kind of an attention to financial resources, team time resources, as you're kind of filtering through what are the best ways to promote mental health awareness and literacy. So I want to share two examples with you. The first one is from North Carolina, and we actually have some team members from North Carolina who are here to answer your questions about this. So in Cleveland County, North Carolina, they have had for a while, which is my understanding, is these resiliency rooms. When they're doing in-person learning, these are designed to teach and support students to self-regulate and build their resiliency. Typically, these are rooms that a student could have assigned as part of their behavior intervention plan and can self-select to access this room. And it's basically, contains materials and activities to help the student calm down and sort of, gather themselves. And there's a variety of things in this room where they can go for 15 minutes at a time. They have the opportunity to request additional support as needed, and the use of the room is tracked to assess the effectiveness of the strategy. You all may have something like this in your in-person learning environments when they're operating, something like a promise room or a resiliency room. The idea is that it's not punitive, but it's something that students can self-select into. This is not an in-school suspension or detention room, right? This is a place where students can go where they need to kind of pull themselves together and learn skills that long-term they're going to be able to draw on independently when they're recognizing they're upset and they need to kind of figure out what they need to do kind of behaviorally, emotionally to pull themselves back together so they can kind of turn their learning brain back on and get back into learning. Well, what happened in Cleveland County, to my understanding, is that they went to virtual learning. And so what happens to your resiliency room when you go to virtual learning? This is a huge gap now for our students who relied on that room as being part of their learning environment as they're building those coping skills. So we love this idea of the virtual reset room that was set up by their mental health therapist. This virtual reset room is actually open to all staff and students. I encourage you to check it out at this really cool bit.ly link. Thank you, Ryan. And I actually got a little lost here. I enjoyed the virtual reset room myself. But basically what it is a website that you can go to. There are a variety of different activities that you can engage in to promote your own coping, self-soothing, distraction, resetting, whatever you need to do for a few minutes to get your thinking brain or learning brain back on. It's absolutely beautiful. There's a lovely introductory video if you go to this site where they describe all about how it works, and we'll kind of walk you through some of the features, everything from wildlife cameras to coloring to sounds and music. So I just want to stop there because it's obviously not something I worked on. This is something Cleveland County did. We do have some representatives from this group. I see Ryan Etheridge is on. He's the project aware evaluator and coach with Cleveland County Schools. And we were connected to this example from Heidi Austin, who's at the Department of Public Instruction in North Carolina. So just want to open it up if folks have questions or comments about the virtual reset room for this team, or if there's anything else that the team wants to add about this that I didn't cover.
I will say I have Madison Weber with me. She's an LPC, and so she really spearheaded the development of this. One of the things that we recognize in our schools is these virtual reset rooms. We had just really started rolling them out and actually getting data and using them in a school and had established all the procedures, and then all of a sudden we were virtual. And so we needed a way. How do you continue the stuff that was working really well now that the environment has changed? And so I thought this was just a brilliant idea by Madison, and it is her who leads you through the introductory video. And I think that in itself is just calming, and it's a self-regulating for me. Just listen to that video. And then I will say one thing our team is working on right now, we're developing a guide so that any school could look at the different spaces in their classroom and across their entire school environment to develop resilient spaces. So a calming corner in an individual classroom, a calming room, a virtual calming room, calming or resiliency focused common areas like hallways or auditoriums, like what could you do in there? And then also a guide for administrators or some of your counselors or social workers who might in that office space tend to have maybe some more intense conversations, and it might be ways to incorporate in strategies for de-escalation in that classroom and or in that office space. So we're developing that guide now. We'll definitely share it with everyone when we get that together. But Madison, is there anything you'd like to share about this?
I'd like to say that whenever I created this, it was definitely like a shot in the dark at whether or not we would get much reception or people would interact with it. But since we've had principals push it out and kind of like advertise it to students in our district, if you will, I've got lots of good feedback from students. I've got feedback from staff who use it. I tried to make sure that I made this with resources that will be good for all ages because I was making this for my district, but you may want to tailor it more to teenagers or younger kids, and that can all be done. I just tried to put a wide array of things on there that people could use for different calming resources.
And this is available to anyone with the link. And so feel free to share. I will say tracking wise, if you share the bit.ly link, I can track how many people access it. And if you share the direct Google website, I can't as much, but that's okay because the most important thing is people use it, less important that we know exactly how many. So anecdotally, just the emails we get back from students that principals forward to us are just awesome. They really love this space, and it's nice for them to have a place, a non-academic space in their virtual learning environment.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. And I'm just pausing to see if there are other questions or comments from the group about how this works or how it was developed. Anything else you all want to know?
I'd be curious to ask if there is another district that would be interested in doing something similar. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about how much time did it take, what kind of resources were involved to develop this, and any tips that you have for someone who may be interested in tailoring this for their district or student populations?
Sure. Several other districts have reached out to me asking for a template for this. If I've got anything created where I can like pass that along and they can easily go in and fill that in. I have not got that done yet, but it is on my list of things to do. Starting from scratch, I mean, this definitely took several days work over the summer as far as getting this done, getting it to look the way I wanted to, making sure it functioned properly and getting it pushed out to schools. And then the instructional video took a while in itself too, just trying to write the script, figure out how to sell it the best and what aspects I wanted to highlight the most. But I am working on some kind of template format that I could push out and share with people because I'm so thrilled that people are interested in it and it's getting such a reception. I did not imagine that at all. So that's something that's on my list.
And so this is designed in the brand new Google Sites. And so if you're familiar with the older Google Sites, you were able to just save as a template and share a template publicly. And that was just our framework from the beginning. Hey, we can just save this as a template and share out. But the new Google Sites doesn't allow that functionality. So I've been talking with our technology department, and we're really hoping we're getting to the point where we might have a template that then we can share you a link and you just get to copy it and then tweak so that you don't have to start over from scratch like we did. So that is something we're working on with our technology department.
Awesome. That's great. And yeah, I like that this is actually not one of your like district web pages, right? This is a completely separate Google site that you stood up. Is that right? I know I'm asking a very rudimentary question right now.
It's within our organizational Google Sites license, but it's not.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So folks would probably need to figure out, work with your, somebody who's in the technology side of your district to figure out what's within your site licensing, if you could stand up a page like this, or if you'd have to go, find another way to stand up this site. Great.
And I'll share that if you're interested in a template, I'm keeping up with everybody who's asked. My contact info is on the main site. So if you'd like to shoot me an email, once I get that project completed, I'll be happy to share that product with you.
Thank you all, and hats off to you. And I'm glad that I did include the bit.ly link. So I encourage people to go there so Ryan and Madison can track everybody who's excited about this site. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to this team or throw questions in the chat for them as we move along with the other content. Very cool idea. Okay, so the next example that we want to share with you, we're actually going to share by showing you this really cool video that was developed by Bay District Schools in Panama City, Florida. And their lens was really on improving mental health literacy for educators. We actually have Dawn Capes on here, who you'll recognize after you see the video. She's the star of this show. And when there are a couple reasons why we wanted to highlight this. When working to increase mental health literacy in school, it's so important that we remember to support the mental health and well-being of our school staff. So this example is really just one way that this school district got the word out to all the staff in their district about the mental health resources they offer. They actually offer a wide variety of resources, but the degree to which teachers will always collect to what's at their disposal is kind of varied, right? They're super busy. I think this video is so beautifully done. We just had to share it. It is focused around help for the holidays. This is something that they released right before the holiday break, but I think that you can create something like this at any time. There's never a time in the school year that's not stressful for teachers and students. So I could see doing a version of this like before or after testing, or before or after spring break, before or after summer, just as a way to remind staff what they have available to them. So with that, I'm going to play the video, which I think is like 4 or 5 minutes. We'll watch it, and then I'll open up for questions to see what you'd like to learn more about from Dawn.
Hello, everyone. Like other school professionals around the world, we are all experiencing an unusual and unsettling school year. Unlike other school professionals around the world, we are doing so in the shadow of our recovery from Hurricane Michael. These back-to-back life-altering events have presented us all with personal and professional hurdles that can sometimes feel insurmountable. Normally, we would all use the holiday season as a time of rejuvenation, rest, and reconnection with family. But as you know, this 2020 holiday season is bringing with it a whole new set of stressors, anxiety, and worry. You may find that the people around you may bring their worries and stressors to you because educators are good listeners. Your peers, friends, or family may want your support and listening ear to help them in their time of need. Supportive listening is always an amazing gift to give anyone. However, sometimes people need more help than what a conversation with a friend can provide. So we want to take a few minutes to remind you of the resources that are available for you and for those who may choose to confide in you during the Christmas break. If your peer, family member, or friend is thinking about self-harm or being violent, stay with them and help them call 911 or the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. Your peer, friend, or family may need more help if they are experiencing inability to fall asleep or stay asleep, or waking with nightmares, problems with eating, either poor appetite or overeating, beyond seasonal snacking, crying spells that feel uncontrollable or last a long time, feeling shaky, worried, anxious, or having chest pain, disinterest in things that they used to enjoy, thoughts or feelings about harming themselves or someone else, using drugs or alcohol more than usual, an inability to concentrate on simple tasks or activities that used to be routine. If your friend or family member is a Bay District School employee, help is available to staff members and family members living in their household through our Educators EAP by calling 1-800-242-4555 or 1-800-225-2527. Remember, this is a free and completely confidential service available 24 hours, 7 days a week. The EAP is staffed by licensed mental health counselors who have been educators themselves, so they understand school and the stressors specific to educators. The Bay Educators Wellness Center is open over the holiday except for Christmas and New Year's Day for Bay District School employees. Angela Stovall is available to provide confidential family and individual counseling. She can be reached by calling 850-215-2896 or through the Marathon Health portal. If your friend or family member is not a member of Bay District Schools, we have linked an extensive list of community resources available on the Bay District Schools website. Bay District Schools does not directly endorse any of the resources listed. We are providing this list for your information only. Any use is at your discretion. If there are any questions, please contact the agency directly. You can navigate to the Bay District Schools website, then to the Community tab to access the list of community resources. The resources listed include support groups, mental health organizations, food banks, and children's programs. I hope that the resources included here are helpful if you find that someone you know needs additional support. Thank you for your commitment to your students, peers, friends, and family members.
All right, I know, right? She covered a lot of bases. I could go on and on about all the things that I love about that video, but I won't, because I just want to open it up and see if there are questions, comments, and I also welcome you, Dawn, to chime in with anything else you'd like to add about context of this work.
Sure. So thank you for having me. It's always so, awkward to watch yourself, then watch yourself be watched by other people watching you. So just kind of a weird circle there. When we are as I mentioned in the video, we have our recovery from Hurricane Michael, then, almost immediately followed by the pandemic. So the educators here are enduring a lot, and we are very blessed to have a lot of some federal dollars that came in following the hurricane that we've used to place licensed master's level mental health professionals at every school. So we felt like this year we had pretty good coverage and assistance, boots on the ground with regard to helping our students. But as this year progressed, sort of anecdotally, we noticed that we had a sort of gap in what we could provide for our educators. So it was important for us to provide the Educators EAP, as well as our own wellness center that we have, and then other community resources. And we've had flyers, we've had our mental health professionals who are there for the students. People hear mental health, so the educators have been dropping in and trying to engage in conversation. So we've tried to talk them through about where the line is and when to direct them someplace else if it's beyond just a venting session. Really the guidance on this video, the approach we wanted to take was almost like that backdoor kind of idea that, we're great listeners, and hey, if any friends you have these situations that they're dealing with, here's how to get them help. But then we also were like, they might, as educators, go, wait a second, that sounds like me. Maybe I need to get some help too. So I was kind of going back to what you said earlier, Dr. Connors, about the sort of the stigma around it. It's easier to identify somebody else who needs help first. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane, put the mask on yourself first, but for educators, they want to help others first. It's almost reverse. So this was a way to try to get around that and have them identify it in somebody else, and then also maybe see that they may need some help too. And then also push out, again, those resources that we have. We just can't put those in front of people enough.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I do love how specific and detailed the resources were at the very end, because it really is a nice complement to the warm message that feels very tailored to educators. It feels very much like an inside, message from another educator, from another person that knows them well, but you're also building that bridge to the help seeking. So I don't think anyone could finish that video in your district without knowing exactly what numbers to call, what websites to go to. You're giving them that instrumental piece to build that bridge as well, which is also kind of an effective component of it. So any other questions or comments for Dawn? Dawn, do you know if your EAP use went up over the holidays at all? Or I don't know if that's anything that you guys are able to kind of track.
We do track it, and I haven't gotten that particular month's worth of data yet. I have asked for some historical information because, like I said, we've just anecdotally noticed that some of our sort of incidences with staff have been on the increase. So we've asked for some data as far as our EAP as well as our wellness centers usage as well. Just to try to figure out what can we think we know, but do we know?
Right, exactly. How did you manage to get your EAP staffed by some folks that have a history in education? I've been curious about that.
You know what? That's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer to that. Elizabeth Granzow, who we work with Serendipity, connected us with that EAP and the educators EAP specifically. So I know that we're not the only ones who use them. They just connected to us, and that is one of the features that sold us on that EAP, is that it's staffed by former educators, because everybody likes to feel like people understand how much, like, does the person on the other end of the call understand me? Like, what am I going through? What's my experience? So that was one of the selling points for us, and getting that service up and running for our staff.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really great feature. And I know just from some of the work that I've done with you all in Bay District as well, part of the work that you've done is to get this information out to your mental health providers in the building, because the mental health providers are often the ones who the teachers may come to first if they have that good relationship and teachers are having a really stressful day and they need to debrief. But oftentimes our mental health providers are kind of in that important moment of figuring out, when is this a handoff that I should gently recommend the educator's EAP? Not to say to a teacher, you can't come in here. Of course you can. And they do offer that support to staff as well as students, but they're really well positioned to do the warm handoff because they are kind of the listening ear in those buildings. And so I know some of the work has been to make sure that the mental health providers, departments of guidance, everybody who may be, most likely to be in a listening ear kind of position has this info at the ready as well. Great. Well, thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible piece of work. And I encourage folks to reach out to Dawn or reach out to us at the Southeast if you have more questions about how they did it. But again, I don't think this has to be specific to the holidays. I could see something like this message being tailored around standardized testing time, spring break, heading out for summer, whatever it is.
Hello.
So I have coming up just a list of other mental health awareness resources that you may be interested in. But before we do that, I just want to pause and see if there are any other local examples that you'd like to share for one another. Either could be something you've been working on for a while to promote mental health awareness, or it could be something that's on your to-do list that you're still toiling with or still trying to roll out. But just wondering if there's any other strategies that you're working on locally that folks would be willing to share as it pertains to mental health literacy and awareness and help seeking.
We have an initiative from one of our directors. She has a parent university. And so traditionally this has been, how do you access FAFSA? What does college applications look like? What are your post-graduation plans? But this year she wanted a specific focus on mental health. And so Madison, along with other members of our team, we've prepared 3 different sessions. And one was, how do you promote resiliency during e-learning at home? So we kind of did a best practices guide for parents. And then next one, we're doing some resiliency strategies that you can use at home with your children. And then our third one is, how do you access mental health resources in your in our specific area. And they've been, I mean, I'm not going to say the attendance is great, but 20 to 30 people who are opting to join in on a Wednesday midday is just something that is great. And these videos are recorded so people can access them later on. And so I thought that was great. It didn't come from us. They just asked us to present. I thought that was wonderful.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And I will say that the one thing we didn't cover here is an example about parents, right? And how we can make sure parents have the info they need, especially when we're talking about the distance learning setting. Sorry, I didn't mean to have to go to this slide next. In the distance learning setting, often parents are having a lot of questions about how much stress is typical for my student, at what point should I be reaching out for more supports? You know, distance learning is very stressful on students and families and everything that comes with managing that. And so I've also heard of a number of schools and districts who are offering like these parent support sessions where it's either didactic or it's like call in and talk to one of our mental health providers, come with your questions, or they're just doing kind of info sessions for parents. Like, here's some tips. What's kind of typical that you might be seeing right now? And when does it start entering into that zone where, you know, you may be worried about your young person and want to reach out to us so we can help you connect to somebody, and just helping parents kind of navigate all those issues and stressors that they're dealing with. So we've seen like virtual town halls and things like that happening, staffed by the mental health team, because a lot of the mental health professionals, I think, are coming up against some of the same questions from families. But if you could do some group sessions around that, there's probably some efficiency, but also a sense that parents aren't in this alone in terms of the stress that they see their students going through. We've also seen, I think we had this highlighted on our last learning session. I know in South Carolina and possibly other areas, they've sent home mental health resource materials with the school lunches that are being delivered to their families who are needing school lunches at home and other meals. In South Carolina, that's being distributed by, in their rural communities, by their school buses. And so they've had their mental health providers doing ride-alongs and connecting with families and sharing mental health resources. So that was another creative example that was shared last time. Okay, so on to more resources here, but if there are other things you all are doing, please feel free to put them in the chat. Oh yeah, I see Bring Change to Mind. That's on my list. Awesome. Thanks, Priest. So as I mentioned before, you might be looking into teacher training as well as student curricula or student training. The ones that have the asterisk here are free of charge to our knowledge, to kind of our best level of digging. So the teacher training resources are classroom-wise. This was developed by the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. It's a free online course coming this year, which we're super excited about. I have a slide on that. Youth Mental Health First Aid, which some of you are probably familiar with. That one is at cost. And then Teach, which I'll tell you about. And then there's a number of student curricula out there that you may consider. So this is classroom-wise. If you go to the website here, there's more information about what is included in this free online course. It was developed in partnership with the National Center for School Mental Health at the University of Maryland. It's intended to be a totally free, practical, and engaging online course and website for educator mental health literacy. WISE stands for Wellbeing Information and Strategies for Educators. And the goal is it has really concrete universal approaches to promoting student mental health and creating safe and supportive learning environments. It describes student behaviors that may indicate a mental health concern, and it gives specific skills and strategies to engage and support students with mental health concerns. They co-developed this with educator input from across the nation. And I'll say, probably on behalf of the MHTTC network in the Southeast, we are so excited about this being released this year. It's been in development for almost a year now. So if you're looking for something free for educators, it should be ready in a couple months here. So keep your eyes on that. And if you're on the listserv for the MHTTC or the Southeast, you'll see as soon as it's released. There's also youth mental health first aid, which you may know about. It's a 6-hour training. It's offered virtually, blended, or in person. There's a virtual release coming soon, which is like a 2-hour self-paced course followed by an instructor-led class. But this is another one that you might want to look at. There's a link here for courses offered in your area and a one-pager with more info. All right, we have a few minutes left, so this is going to be like resources on parade. Hang in here with me, folks. This one is called Teach. It's a mental health course for educators. It is evidence-based and available to download online. You have to enter some details to create an account, but then you can access it. I did it myself just to double check. And then you download the curriculum. There's really great other, so this is Teach. This is the mental health curriculum for educators. And then this is a related one, which is mental health and high school curriculum guide, that this is for students. And so if you want to download the curriculum, there's a great link right there, as well as some other outstanding resources for teens, parents, and high school. So if you're looking for something that kind of goes across the teacher to student, continuum, this could be a good one to look at because it is free. They have some nice COVID resources on here, which I like too. That's why I linked that. So there's just like some great one-pagers and things you can access for distribution. Break Free from Depression. This is in the public domain. I think it's newly in the public domain. I believe it used to be at cost. There are not COVID-related updates right now, but there is an online train the trainer workshop and a classroom curriculum that you can download and use. This has pretty good evidence behind it. It's really for high school students, awareness and knowledge about depression specifically. So if you have concern about depression awareness, suicide risk in your high schools, this could be one to look into for your health classes or something like that. NAMI, Ending the Silence. This is the one that I was speaking to before. They will basically come and do as an assembly for you, or in these days it would be a virtual type of an assembly. It is evidence-based. It's a 50-minute presentation. Usually they'll send a teen and or a parent that's been impacted by mental illness to speak a little bit about their own story to help increase that kind of knowledge of mental health issues and some empathy building. Bring Change to Mind is an awesome way to start a student group if that's something you're interested in, really capitalizing on that student voice. This is a great organization. I've seen some of these groups to present and they will knock your socks off. You do need a faculty member at one of your high schools to sponsor this, just like any other student group or club, but this organization will provide a lot of support, resources, and scaffolding for you at no cost to put together a group like this. Very similar, you could look into Active Minds. This is another high school chapter program that works the same way. If you need something for younger ones, this is a resource from kindergarten to 4th grade classrooms. It does not appear to be in the public domain, so you might want to look into this and see if there are costs associated, and you'll have access to all these slides. So I know there's a lot of content you may want to refer back to. And then last but not least, Our Minds Matter. This is another one where it would be like a student group, and then you would have advisors or leaders who would kind of head up this student group. And again, they offer resources and materials and scaffolding. So you're not just kind of creating a brand new wheel, but you're signing up for their resources that are free of charge and some support. So those resources are listed here. And with that, we're just wrapping up for the next couple minutes of the call. And I want to hand it off to Tara Koch to tell us a little bit about the evaluation for today.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, and thank you to all of the guest speakers who have provided such awesome information to us. So in the link, you will see that in the chat, you'll see that I put a link to our evaluation, and we ask that you please fill this out. It'll just take a few minutes. We are required by our funder, SAMHSA, to get this evaluation from you all to get feedback and make sure that we are providing resources that you all need. And like I said, it will just take a few minutes. And once you complete and submit that evaluation, it will redirect you to a different link, which is a Qualtrics survey, which is our internal evaluation. And this really helps us get more detailed information from you all and feedback to improve our trainings. So feel free to click on that link and take the evaluation. I'll also be sending it out in an email if you don't have a chance to do it right now, if you're jumping into a next meeting. So thank you so much for participating and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And again, if you need the recording and slides, the Southeast MHTTC will post that. So I know some folks asked about that. So thank you for joining and have a wonderful day.